Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. We're in. But if you are fortunate enough to be working from home, great day of college hoops. Started at about 1:30 Eastern with the Indiana-Texas game and basically went nonstop until after midnight with Kentucky-Kansas. And we will actually start with where the day ended with Kentucky-Kansas. And yeah, it wasn't pretty. As I said, I don't know that either team deserved to win. Kansas does, in fact, win 65-62. And like I said off the top, I guess you could argue that they deserve to lose less than Kentucky did. Very frustrating game for Kentucky. And I think with the two games on Tuesday night, what I'm going to do is start with the losing team because to me, sometimes the victor is the better story, but the victor is the better headline, but the loser is the better story, I should say. And so let's start with the loser in game one. That is Kentucky. And I don't know what to say. I mean, this was almost a carbon copy of what happened on Sunday afternoon against Richmond. We obviously talked about it on Monday's show, but it's an incredibly frustrating time for Kentucky basketball fans. It's an incredibly frustrating time for the players in that locker room, and it's a frustrating time for John Calipari. You fall to 1-2. And really more so even than the Richmond game, this Kansas game was there for the taking, man. I mean, it's one thing to just have a bad second half, and I'm not making excuses for Kentucky because it was beyond bad, but you put that aside, you say, okay, we had one bad half, what can we learn from this game? And then you take it to the next game in Kansas, and for about, probably 25 minutes, you feel really good that this team really has evolved. For people who watched the game, Kentucky largely dominated the first half. They were up as much as 17-5 at one point, and as much as 16 points with about 5 minutes to go in the first half. And really everything that went wrong on Sunday, it seemed as though it was fixed. The defensive energy was there. There was structure on the offense. You're getting good shots. You're getting the ball down low to Olivier Sarr, the star transfer. Again, the defense is phenomenal. The energy in the building, you could hear the Kentucky guys cheering on the sidelines, not as obnoxiously as Duke, by the way, which we're going to get into in a minute. And everything's going good. And then, unfortunately, halftime comes and the same exact thing happens that happened with Richmond. All of a sudden, you get out of halftime. Kentucky starts to slip a little bit before halftime, but is still largely in control. And fortunately for them, Kansas was not able to capitalize on their sluggish start to the second half. If Kansas had played, I think, even half decent, they would have taken the lead earlier and run away with this thing. Instead, Kentucky is able to kind of scrap and claw to stay in the game. But the second half was largely exactly what you saw from the Richmond game a few nights ago. You get to the second half, and it gets really sloppy on offense. You stop running plays. You over-dribble. You take bad shots. I mean, no disrespect to the kid, but Terrence Clark, the star freshman, is just jacking up weird shots at weird times too early in the shot clock. And really, it was just a reflection of, again, everything that happened on Sunday coming back to fruition. Now, I know this is a young team. I know they're getting thrown into the fire because of the fact that there are really no out-of-conference games against easy opposition. You play Morehead State, and then you immediately jump into Richmond, Kansas, and from here on out, Kentucky has only Power 5 teams left on the schedule. But, man, it's not as though you just got beat by a clearly superior team on Tuesday night. Instead, it is self-inflicted wounds. It is an inability to play smart basketball, and I do understand the frustration of a Kentucky fan. The very simple facts that you need to know about Kentucky right now. If you're not a Kentucky fan and you're listening to this, first of all, shout out to you. I know I'm going deep on Kentucky, but they're the most interesting story in college basketball right now. They're 1-2. They've lost 2 games to 2 really good teams, but Kentucky's no different than Duke basketball or Kansas basketball or, frankly, Gonzaga. You're expected to win every game. And so when you fall to 1-2, people are going to raise questions. And if I can explain what's wrong in 2 simple stats, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Like I said a minute ago, you get to the second half, you stop running offense. You stop doing the basic things. You stop making crisp passes. You stop taking good looks at the basket rather than you force jump shots instead. And if there's 2 stats that reflect it, it's this. In the last 2 games, which again almost mirror each other identically for people who did not watch them, Kentucky in the last 2 games, 13 assists, 36 turnovers. Not great at math, but that's what? Almost 4-1, 3-1. It's almost 1-3 assists to turnovers. That's a disaster, okay? Secondly, you are 3 for 21 from three-point land. And I understand, everyone has a good game, a bad game, whatever. You're not going to beat anyone. Forget Richmond being good. Is Kansas good? You're not beating the worst teams in the SEC if you can't be better than 3 for 21 from 3, and you can't do a better job of distributing the ball and handling the ball rather than turning the ball over 36 times in 2 games with only 13 assists to show for it. And listen, I understand people want to be critical of John Calipari, and they should be, but I thought it was interesting. He said exactly that at halftime. At halftime, Kentucky had the lead, and he even said, we're not sharing the ball well enough. We're not doing enough. We're not passing the ball around enough. And so, again, I think you got to blame the coaching staff. I'm not saying don't blame the coaching staff, but at a certain point, these guys, I understand they're freshmen. Play smarter. You got to be a basketball player. You can't be forcing bad shots. You can't be over-dribbling. You can't be dribbling with your head down. You can't be doing the things that Kentucky is doing. So in terms of broader picture stuff. First of all, I should say before I even go any further, there were some positive signs for Kentucky. I mean, the positive signs were that this kid, Isaiah Jackson, freshman, he's considered the 3rd, 4th, 5th best recruit in this class. Maybe not the 5th, but maybe the 3rd best recruit in this class behind BJ Boston, Brandon Boston, and Terrence Clark. This kid's been unbelievable. 12 rebounds, 8 blocks, a total difference maker, a total game changer, a total energy guy, and I think, frankly, has been Kentucky's best player over the first 3 games. Davion Mintz, transfer from Creighton. For people who do not know, 5th-year guy. He was brought in to play off the ball and shoot threes and not be a star and be a role player, and that's exactly what he's doing. 12 points on Tuesday night, a big 3 late, 2 for 5 from 3. The rest of his team, by the way, 1 for 16 from 3. I thought that Jacob Toppin, another transfer, Obi Toppin's brother, played well. Here is the issue, though. Those guys were all supposed to be role players. Jacob Toppin wasn't even supposed to be eligible to play this year. And so the bigger issue is that you're getting exactly what you want from your role players. It's the guys that you thought were going to be stars that are not living up to their end of the bargain. And before we go forward, I just want to make it abundantly clear. I always say it on this podcast is I try not to criticize college athletes too much because they are amateurs and they're doing their best and they're not paid. And once you get paid, it's a different deal. But what I would also say, you go to Kentucky to be under a spotlight, to be under a microscope, to be great, to show the world how good you are at basketball. And so I have to say that the guys that are expected to carry this team so far have not lived up to their end of the bargain. Olivier Sarr, transfer from Wake Forest. I still believe that he was the best transfer in college basketball last offseason. He's been great when he's on the court, but he gets in too much foul trouble. And I know a Kentucky fan would say a couple of them were cheapies. I get it. But you're a veteran. You have to be smarter. Some of them weren't cheapies. Some of them were lazy. Some of them were sloppy. You got to be better. Terrence Clark, I just mentioned it. 5-star, McDonald's All-American, one and done, lottery pick in all the mock drafts. Over dribbles, bad jump shot, doesn't create for others. Not saying he's a bad kid, a bad person, doesn't, but when you're on the court, when you're on the stage, you're either delivering or you're not. And right now, he is not playing up to the recruiting hype. Same with BJ Boston, who actually did play pretty well today. But if you look at his season as a whole, he was considered to be one of the best shooters in high school basketball last year. He hasn't hit a single three-pointer. And so, again, this isn't me tearing down these kids, but what it is saying is you come to Kentucky to be on one of the biggest stages in college basketball. along with Duke, along with Carolina, along with Kansas, these are the biggest stages in college basketball, and that's why you come to Kentucky, to be great, to show the world how good you are, to show the world what you're capable of, and obviously it translates to the next level, and we saw that success with the NBA bubble. But with that said, these guys aren't living up to it right now. And so as far as this team is concerned, it's why it's disappointing. And I'll just say this. People are going to criticize me. Well, Torres, you were the one that was hyping them up all offseason. And yeah, you're right, I was. But they also have 2 of the top 10 prospects in high school basketball coming in who, oh, by the way, this was a great class for high school basketball. And I understand, guys, I've been doing this long enough. I understand that these freshmen don't always live up to the hype, don't always step in and deliver from day one. I get that. I understand it. I talked about it on last podcast. But when you have 2 top 10 recruits in a really good recruiting class, you expect a little bit more consistency, a little bit more, I don't know what the right word is. Toughness isn't the right word. A little bit more basketball IQ in some cases. And you expect these guys to deliver. Right now, they're not. Right now, Olivier Sarr can't stay on the floor, and that's the problem. I will say, looking ahead, I think there's some big picture things, some little picture things that are both positive and negative. The negative is, like I said, this was not a vintage Kansas team. This game was there for the taking, and as I said, it is easy to kind of say, well, you're young and you're going to get better, but guess what? The schedule doesn't get any easier. The schedule from this point on is all Power 5 teams. Going forward, you play Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, UCLA, and Louisville, and then you start the SEC play. So you don't have that normal schedule to kind of get you back on track and get you ready for the season ahead and all of those things that you normally do. People criticize John Calipari, and it's one thing he talked about at his press conference the other day. But, there's a reason that he schedules UAB and Eastern Kentucky and whomever, and it's because of the fact that he has a young team every year that he needs to get them to figure things out and get them going. I would say, if you're looking for some silver linings as opposed to the negative stuff, one, first of all, some of those teams just don't look as good as we thought they would be. Georgia Tech's a disaster. I think I talked about it on the last show, but Josh Pastner, who's my guy, decided to do contactless practices this offseason. In other words, no 5-on-5, and Georgia Tech's really struggling. That's Kentucky's next opponent. Notre Dame got blown out by Michigan State the other day, and UCLA doesn't look as good as expected. Now, I think UCLA is going to get there, but are they going to get there in 3 weeks? I don't know. So to me, that is a silver lining. And then the other silver lining is there really is some positivity that can come out of all this. First of all, had my buddy JC, listener to this show, he just tweeted at me, and he brings up a great point. Kentucky is shooting 9% from three-point land right now, okay? 9%. If they just shoot 20% from the field, 25% from the field, which is abysmal, they win this game, and they're 2-1, and they're feeling a lot better, and it's not as much of a big deal. The guys down low, Olivier Sarr and Isaiah Jackson, are playing well. Davion Mintz is playing well off the ball. So there are positives going in, and it's little stuff that is fixable. That is, I guess that's what I would say. I'm spitballing here off the top of my head. It's 1:15 Eastern time. I'm trying to just do this, react to the game. But what I would say is, the stuff that needs to be fixed, for the most part, is fixable, right? At some point, B.J. Boston is going to hit threes. At some point, you would hope that Olivier Sarr can stay out of foul trouble. And if you get that, and if you get Terrence Clark to make 1 or 2 less bad decisions a game, and you just get what you're getting from Isaiah Jackson and Davion Mintz, you're going to be okay. But I understand the frustration. I understand, and frankly, I understand a Kentucky fan that says, Calipari gives me the same line every offseason. People say that I'm a Calipari defender, I'm a Calipari homer. Listen, what I think he does every year is really, really, really hard, getting a brand new team every season, getting them to figure things out, and especially this year, in the circumstances that we're in with COVID, where he had less practice time, no exhibitions, no scrimmages, no games against bad teams. So I do think it is legitimately tough what he is doing. What I would also say on the flip side is I understand a Kentucky fan that's like, dude, every year we have to deal with this. Well, they're 18, they're 19. Like at some point, like we got to come into a season ready to go. So I understand the frustration. I understand the anger, frankly, because this was a winnable game. This was not Kansas just going lights out. Like I would argue Richmond played much better than Kansas did in their matchup with Kentucky. And so I understand a Kentucky fan's frustration. I guess all I would say is that most of this is fixable. You can't shoot 9% from 3 for the entire season. If you just shoot 20% instead of 9%, all of a sudden, we're talking about a team that probably wins these games and is going to win a lot of other ones. And then I just think it's about working through the late game jitters. You got to be able to run offense. You got to have confidence in what you're doing. And you got to just you can't freeze in those big moments the way that they have. I know it's cliche. Calipari will figure it out, but I do understand the frustration tonight.